again to my show, Searching for Integrity. My name really is John Smith, and I'm searching for people with integrity. Why? Because our country suffers from IDD, Integrity Deficit Disorder. Today, I have a couple of things in mind I'd like to present to you, my audience, my listeners. The first of which is breaking news that I saw this morning. I thought you'd be interested in it. It's about the Uvalde, Texas shootings. A lot of people are interested in that, and I think they're waiting on information. This is the first piece that I could find. I'll begin with the article. It's the commander at the scene of shooting at the elementary school in Uvalde, Texas, was not informed of the panicked 9/11 calls coming from students trapped inside the building as the massacre unfolded. A Texas state senator said this on Thursday. Senator Roland Gutierrez said the pleas for help from people inside Robb Elementary School on May 24th did not make their way to School District Police Chief Pete Arredondo. The Democratic senator called it a system failure, that calls were going to the city police but were not communicated to Arredondo. I want to know specifically who was receiving the 9/11 calls, Gutierrez said during a news conference, adding that no single person or entity was fully to blame for the massacre. This is really interesting, I think. And as part of this, I think that the Republican governor, Greg Abbott, should accept much of the responsibility for the failures in the police response. There was error at every level, including the legislative level, including Greg Abbott, and has plenty of blame in all of this. 19 children and 2 teachers died, as we all know at this point, deadliest school shooting in nearly a decade. 17 more were injured. Funerals all week for these students. Abbott this week ordered the state to conduct in-person school district security audits and asked top lawmakers to convene a legislative committee to make recommendations on school and firearm safety. The next Texas legislative session is scheduled in January 23. Gutierrez is among several lawmakers who have urged Abbott, who is running for re-election, to call a special session in response to the shooting. The gunman, 18-year-old Salvador Ramos, spent roughly 80 minutes inside the school, and more than an hour passed from when the first officers followed him into the building when he was killed by law enforcement. Since the shooting, law enforcement and state officials have struggled to present an accurate timeline and details of the event and how police responded, sometimes providing conflicting information or withdrawing some statements hours later. State police have said some accounts were preliminary and may change as more witnesses are interviewed. Much of the focus turned to Arredondo. Stephen McCraw, the head of the Texas Department of Public Safety, said Arredondo believed the situation had turned into a hostage situation and made the wrong decision to not order officers to attempt to breach the classroom as 9/11 calls were being made to the outside. Gutierrez said it's unclear if any details from the 9/11 calls were being shared with law enforcement officers from multiple agencies on the scene. Uvalde Police Department was the one receiving the 9/11 calls for 45 minutes while officers were sitting in a hallway, while 19 officers were sitting in a halfway in a hallway, again for 45 minutes, Gutierrez said. We don't know if it was being communicated to those people or not. But the senator said the Commission on State Emergency Communications told him school district police chief did not know. He's the incident commander. He did not receive the 9/11 calls, Gutierrez said. Arredondo has not responded to interview requests from the Associated Press. Phone messages were not there. The Uvalde Police Department is waiting for more information with regards to the shootings and the timing of the investigation that I believe are involved with the state of Texas, probably the feds involved, and the local police people. This is one of those matters when you're not playing on the same base, you're not playing on the same field for something like this to happen. And I was thinking about a movie I saw once upon a time called Forrest Gump. Forrest Gump had a famous saying, "Stupid is as stupid does." And it certainly appears to be in the case here in this terrible shooting. So that's the piece of information I wanted you to know and to have. I am anticipating more information. However, we have to wait for that information to come out. We have to wait for others to give us something to put our toes, dip our toes into, and so we just have to wait. We have to wait until we can pursue this more, and we will do so. My primary purpose today is to describe another one of my little books. As you know, I'm the author of Embracing the Abyss, and my little books are going to be entitled Embracing Your Abyss for a lot of different reasons. The one today is, subject of today is PTSD. Some of you are familiar with PTSD. I hope that you're not suffering from PTSD. There are others that are, and believe me, they're working on it. It's quite a bit of a crisis with the military and with the VA. The title of my next little book regarding PTSD, the title is What is PTSD and Why Am I Crying? Examples of events which may cause PTSD. Let's first have a look at what the definition of PTSD is. It's post-traumatic stress disorder. Can develop after exposure to a potentially traumatic event that is beyond a typical stressor. Events that may lead to PTSD include, but are not limited to, violent personal assaults, natural or human-caused disasters, accidents, combat, and other forms of violence. Exposure to events like these is common. About 1/2 of all U.S. adults will experience at least one traumatic event in their lives, but most do not develop PTSD. People who experience PTSD may have persistent, frightening thoughts and memories of the events, experience sleep problems, feel detached or numb, or may easily be startled. In severe forms, PTSD can significantly impair a person's ability to function at work, at home, and socially, and in school. I think in terms of the children left behind at the elementary school and what they've gone through, I'm going to guess that every one of those children is going to have some form of PTSD as they grow older. And there should be some sort of psychological effort in order to work with them, uh, to let them uh, have thoughts about it, talk about it, and this will hopefully see in the news when it comes out as well for much. It's thought actually that the percentage of the population is between 7 and 8% that suffer from PTSD. And women are more likely to be affected more than men. It's and I know something of this. The VA alerted me, and I guess it was probably 3 or 4 years ago that I was diagnosed as having PTSD, and it is quite the matter. And I guess I should say an explanation of why am I crying. Um, I know from having my own family with my father, who was mentally ill. He was severely depressed. And he, of course, did the best he could, but he was working on slim information. He did not know about what he was going through. I remember many times that, well, I want to say something else to you. They used to show airports and dads and moms coming home from military duty, and they were coming as a surprise to see children, family, those type of things, visitors. Whenever I would see one of those events, I would have to literally almost bite my tongue, because it was a military dad coming home and surprising everyone, and then everyone began crying, and crying for happiness, of course, and I'm left looking at a TV crying myself. It probably comes, for me anyway, when my dad, he would cry a lot. And I remember my sister, younger sister, and I, we would ask my mother, Mommy, why is Daddy crying? And the answer was always, I don't know, Johnny. I don't know. It's a list of events that can cause PTSD or deep depression. My dad's event was that he was a one person in a matter of, I guess there were 10 or 11 brothers and sisters, children in the family. And my dad was the youngest until my Uncle Roland was born. And my dad was 8 years old, and he had been sleeping with his mother, Mammy. She's the grandmother for me. And when Uncle Roland was born, there weren't many beds in the house, so my dad virtually, literally, got kicked out of bed. And it's amazing how something like that can affect someone with serious depression. He never forgot it. He never got over it. He was unable to deal with it. And through his lifetime, he spent time in state um, mental institutes in attempting to overcome this depression that he had. He was a good man. He was a very uh, loving man. He was a funny man. He had the quick wit. Um, but it takes me back to this when I see the people coming home and the children running to them. And I think in Japan they call it, or was that a movie, I think, they call it cry for happy. And it gets me every time. So generally I now turn it off. When I see one's coming on, I'm turning it off. I've seen enough. Um, there are examples of events that can give you an information with respect to PTSD and what causes it. Examples of the events. Having been exposed to death or threatened death, serious injury, or sexual violence, whether directly through witnessing it, by it happening to a loved one, or during professional duties. That's some serious stuff there. Quite serious stuff. I know that experience following is trying to determine if people are acting from this. Intrusion symptoms, avoidance symptoms, two or more symptoms that affect mood and thinking, two or more arousal and reactive symptoms that began after the trauma. Um, my indication for those that at the VA was that although I sleep very well, I had many indications. A lot was from noises, loud noises that you're not expecting a loud noise, and boom. A lot of that could have certainly come with me, back with me, with Vietnam. I was not in the infantry, thank God. Uh, they were known as grunts, and I'm just glad I wasn't one of those. Um, some of the intrusion symptoms are nightmares, flashbacks, and sensation that the event is happening again. That fearful thoughts come your way. Avoidance systems are refusing to discuss the event, avoiding situations that remind me the person of the event. Arousal and reactivity symptoms, difficulty sleeping. Thank God I sleep pretty well. Irritability and angry outbursts, hypersensitivity to possible dangers, feeling tense and anxious. A lot of symptoms can affect your mood and your thinking. I went to the restaurant with my wife the other night to have a dinner. And during that dinner, we were sitting next to the bar. And sometimes the people at the bar would get pretty loud. And each of those caused me to be unable to ask them to shut up and not to be so loud. But that's part of the package when you have PTSD. It's one of those surprises that you get from PTSD. symptoms that affect mood and thinking, inability to remember some aspects of the event, feelings of guilt and blame, feeling detached and estranged from others and emotionally and mentally numbed, having a reduced interest in life, difficulty concentrating, mental health problems such as depression, phobias, and anxiety. I can certify for myself that sometimes, some days, I have difficulty concentrating. Um, I'm going to say it comes from that. It comes from the time that I was struggling with a battle of avoiding prison. In my book, Embracing the Abyss, is a story of my memoir, of giving me certainly much to think about. My memoir is about that, Embracing the Abyss. And I was unaware of the events that were going on at Vernon Savings during the credit crisis. And when the feds came to Dallas, they came for blood and guts. And they were interested in uh, publication of what was going on. And I didn't know much about it. Didn't really matter though. Um, if you worked there, you were guilty. If you were a delivery person, you were looked at as someone that knew something that everybody else did not. Um, from that, my lawyer helped me overcome the situation. He helped me cross the Rubicon, and I became crossing the Rubicon is an old saying. Julius Caesar was crossing the Rubicon River, and he crossed the river. He was in a civil war with the rest of Italy. Becoming a member of the other camp, I became a witness for the government, and they told me that I had saved them thousands of hours and millions of dollars. But the thought of fighting off that feeling of waking up in the morning and looking at the ceiling in my bedroom and wondering if I was in prison yet, that went on every morning, every morning, every morning. I was a witness for the Justice Department for 14 years. And during those 14 years, I learned a lot about what I didn't know that I was testifying to, because then it was information. I was a financial person. I was the CFO. However, I wasn't involved in any of the reporting or calculating income and expense. Um, I then received, because of my steady, long-term duty to try to right the wrongs that occurred, even though I wasn't a wrong person. I didn't steal anything. I didn't take anything. I didn't help anybody else do anything such as that. And I was given the opportunity to make application for a presidential pardon. And in doing the presidential pardon, the application, uh, they assigned to me an attorney, a pardon attorney. And her name was Hope. Can't get better than that. And I would call and talk to Hope probably every Thanksgiving. And I would say, Hope, we've got some more turkeys on the TV that are being pardoned. And she would say, now, Mr. Smith, I can't help you with any of this. Um, I just can't do it. And I said, well, I understand that. I'm just calling to make sure that my application is not in the trash can. And 7 years later, phone rang, and it was Hope. And she said, President Bush would like to grant you a pardon and wish you Merry Christmas. And that's one of the times when my legs literally came out from under me, and I hit the kitchen floor pretty hard. Symptoms that affect mood and thinking. I guess you could think that was probably a good example. Inability to remember some aspects of the event, feelings of guilt and blame, feeling detached and estranged from others, and emotionally and mentally numbed, having a reduced interest in life, difficulty concentrating. That's where we were before. And I wonder if people, or if there's a product or something that I could take over the counter or even prescribed to be able to brain freeze, that's what I'll call it. Sometimes in situations, it's like brain freeze. Mental health problems such as depression, phobias, and anxiety. In addition, the symptoms must lead to distress or difficulty coping with work or relationships, and they may not be due to the use of medication or other substances or another health condition. There are some physical symptoms rather. I don't think that that's something that we can, if they have headaches and dizziness and stomach problems and things like that. Not sleeping, weakened immune system. They also have, look out the PSD for children and teens. I don't think that, I'd like to see squadrons of psychologists begin therapy for those kids in the Robb Elementary School in Uvalde. Self-help can sometimes be good if it's good self-help. Sometimes there are books. Sometimes there are records or tapes that you can listen to, CDs for self-help. The causes, again, can bring traumatic event. You can imagine that. Examples include military confrontation, natural disasters, serious accidents, terrorist attacks, loss of a loved one, whether or not this involved violence, rape or other types of abuse, personal assault, being a victim of a crime. I guess that would include me. Receiving a life-threatening diagnosis. Any situation that triggers fear, shock, horror, or helplessness can lead to PTSD. Let's think about things that you can help. Having additional problems after an event. Lacking of social support after an event. Having a history of mental health problems or substance use. Past experience of abuse, for example, during childhood. Probably some of that with my own father. Having poor physical health before or as a result of an event. Some physical and general factors may play a role, generic role. These may impact the chance of having anxiety, depression, and PTSD. Note how you can separate PTSD from just general depression. Brain structure. Brain scans have shown that the hippocampus appears different in people with PTSD compared with others. The hippocampus is involved in processing emotions and memories, and it could affect the chance of having flashbacks. I remember when I came home from Vietnam and was sleeping at my parents' house, that on a number of occasions there was a siren going off, either for an ambulance or the police. And when that siren went off, that was the signal for incoming, for rockets in Nam. And I hit the floor and tried my best to crawl into the bed. And then I was in a mode. I woke up and it took me a while to go to bed again, but I did. So those kinds of things that cause response to stress. Gender, this may play a role. Studies suggest that while men are more likely to experience violence, women have a higher chance of having PTSD. Interesting. Very interesting. I think that I will wait to deliver more information as I began with the elementary school. And I'm glad to do that, very much so. I'd like to thank you for joining me today and provide you information on PTSD from a personal standpoint, I might add. And I want to thank you, listeners, my audience, and thank you again for tuning in to Searching for Integrity. So long, and happy trails to all.